Okay, so we're going to continue the theme of comparison and contrast by looking at the differences and similarities between pyramids from the ancient Egyptian era and the Mayan era. Now what I've done is I've found an essay online that I'm going to read to you, so there's a copy of it in Google Docs. There's also a link to the website. Now, why I chose this is because this is from a website called Academia, and this is a sample paper written from a question. The question is, choose two pyramid building cultures and compare the similarities and differences in the methods of construction and use of their pyramids. So this is an academic question from a university. So this is basically the answer to a university question. I want you to see how far removed you are now from where you're going to need to be in a couple of years. So I want you to look at this answer, that this is a typical answer that would be expected from a university degree course. So now I'll read it out to you, you follow along. You can either follow along on the video or you can open up the doc or the link. So I'll read it to you, please follow along and then answer the questions in Google Classroom. Introduction. Pyramids have captured the imagination of peoples around the world since the earliest of times. Medieval Europeans considered the pyramids to be Joseph's granaries, while some modern-day pyramidologists believe in a pan-global pyramid-building culture or alien intervention in ancient societies. I won't read the references. Given the geographical and temporal differences between pyramid-building cultures, this cannot be the case. Well, I hope he makes a good point for why it cannot be the case. This paper will compare Old Kingdom dynasty Europeans and late classic Mayans, Paleolithic, and argue that the similarities demonstrate a story of early state formation and the ideologies necessary for statehood. Overarching themes are examined: religious ideologies based on an afterlife and divine leaders linked to godhood. While the secular economy focuses on centralized accumulation of capital and social status, resource and power control through tribute and taxation, in turn the public becomes dependent upon the state. Next, differences based on environmental and cultural context are examined. Understanding pyramids requires both the secular and religious worldview being understood. Differences between pyramid building cultures are characterized by environment, landscapes, and ethnographies. Sorry, my eyes are a bit tired. I'm spending too much time on a computer. I don't agree with a lot of this. I don't agree with almost anything he said so far. Similarities between pyramid cultures. This section examines pyramid architecture, the construction workforce, and similarities in use. What makes these similarities exceptional is the fact that these civilizations had no contact with each other. All connections or relationships between the old and the new world have been severed before the dawn of the Neolithic era. Thus, what these cultures must have shared is what is fundamentally early statehood functions and ideologies. As for the evolution of the pyramid shape, the world's first monumental royal tomb was Djoser's Step Pyramid. It was a tiered stone architectural wonder made from limestone, somewhat resembling the Mayan tiered pyramids. At Egypt, this progression must have been important. It took several attempts to create the iconic straight-sided pyramids, at which King Sneferu's Red Pyramid succeeded, after which point the form was continued. None of that's correct. The method of moving construction materials from quarry to site and building the pyramids demonstrates the dedication to the pyramid building mission. From the quarry, stone was moved, as in Egypt, by teams of workers using ropes and rollers or sledges. There is no evidence of this whatsoever. Additionally, in Egypt, boats would ship necessary supplies to the large-scale harbour nearby Khufu's Great Pyramid, linked by canals to the Nile River. A common sight on Old Kingdom tomb reliefs. Once the building material arrived at the quarry, the stone would be moved up to the pyramid according to Lau's theory. A whole system of ramps led from the quarries to the construction site. There would have been very similar scenes at Mayan ceremonial centres. It is now time to consider similarities in the use and worldviews of pyramids. The shape of the pyramid is important to its use and worldview. Overarching similarities between Mayan and Egyptian beliefs are examined here. The general shape is distinct, a tall, highly elevated monumental structure with sloping sides. The straight-sided Egyptian pyramid reflects the sun's rays, while the Mayan tiered sides resemble the mountains, which were highly sacred. The sun's rays to set sail for heavens, while the mountain staircase allowed the Mayan king to climb to heaven. Mesoamericans and Egyptians worshipped the sun god as an important natural life force? No. They believed in the continued existence of the individual, his rebirth after death, and the concept of eternity remained a constant feature of their religious and funerary ideas. This was representative of human experience. The primary beneficiary to this belief was the social state. Above all, the divine king. In fact, in Old Kingdom Egypt, it was believed that the king alone enjoyed an individual afterlife, and all of his subjects experiences eternity only through him, therefore demonstrating another aspect of hierarchical religious power in early statehoods. Mayan leaders also benefited most in the afterlife. The point is continued in the next section upon examining the differences between pyramid cultures. And we have a picture and a poorly written tag. The sun cult priesthood offers gifts to the eternal sun god that proves life and order to Egypt and the world, provides life. And you can plainly see that the picture is completely representing something totally different to what the tagline says it is. The pyramid construction workforce demonstrates power, resources and labour moving from the outer villages towards the pyramid centres. Complex, sorry, I really can't read this, it's very small. Or ceremonial centre, Mayan, controlled by the divine king. Rather than slaves, the workforce was something much closer to a temporary army, whose soldiers were healthy young men recruited from the towns or the farmlands. Conscripts were recruited from outlying villages to live in the centre for contracted periods of time. With the sheer volume of work, it would be necessary to enlist thousands of workers all year round in order to build the permanent structures. Beyond the centre, the Mayan and Egyptian people continued to live in simple towns. Sorry, the writing's quite bad, sorry. In Egypt, pyramid towns were founded, providing the craft specialists, officials and general workforce with temporary accommodation, hospitals, ritual centres and farms, while the Mayan workforce lived around the ceremonial centre during construction. And there's, again, no evidence of this because we're talking about temporary structures which wouldn't have survived more than 5 years, let alone tens of thousands. So we really don't know. This is all conjecture. Though there were multiple layers of hierarchy at construction sites, based on what? I mean, there's no evidence of this. Regional princes command the king's priesthood, who in turn held power over the lower classes. This relationship of economic and political control ensured power flowed from the periphery towards the centre, which permeated through the religious, secular spheres through ideological processes. Social elites had created a cultural belief system formed around a central idea that the divine king kept order in a universe that would otherwise tear itself apart in a war between benevolent and malicious gods. The idea encouraged people to continue their efforts towards building pyramids. In turn, the architecture of power, methods of construction and control of the pyramid building workforce further separated the two social classes and created a relationship of dependence that benefited the elite. Differences between pyramid cultures. Unlike Egyptian pyramids, Mayan pyramids were always rebuilt on the same site. A larger construction was always built on top of the old pyramids. The fact that only the priesthood and king could climb the stairs represented both sacred ground and a divine king. Atop the stairs sat a monumental pedestal and hollowed enclaves dedicated to ancestral and deity ritual worship. This was never the case at Egypt. The reason for this is that Mayan rituals were important for the public eye, an event that the community looked upon in awe as the sacrifices took place. It's worth pointing out at this point that there is no evidence that the Mayans built these pyramids. They more likely found them and used them for ritual purposes. But I don't think they built them in the first place. Whereas the pharaohic rituals included much mystery, only the elite or death cult were entitled to partake. During ceremonies inside the tomb, further segregating the community. Mayan construction methods involved a system placing the outer stonework together, allowing liquid cement poured into the gaps to dry and hold together the stone. The stone casing was built gradually. As the wall rose, the cement was able to harden in a succession of superposed layers. The benefit of this technique allowed the ability to better shape and form unique monuments with artistic stone cuts. Egyptians, on the other hand, used simpler forms of construction tools for their time. Hammers, sledges, wooden frames with gypsum and rubber filling material. They had less binding properties than Mayan cement. And yet they've lasted for, something like 18,000 years. A system whereby the outer blocks of stone, carefully joined together without mortar, were capable of containing the liquid cement mixed with rubble, making wooden coffering unnecessary. The other stone casing was built gradually with the cement poured in at intervals so that, as the wall rose, the cement was able to harden in a succession of superposed layers. The technique was advanced for its time. Its benefit was the ability to better shape and form unique monumental pyramids with inlaid artistry. I think, again, this is completely backwards. The Egyptian pyramids showed a higher level of sophistication because the stone cutting was way beyond the ability of the Mayan pyramid builders. He's getting it all wrong. Everything about what he's saying, almost everything, is completely wrong. If you've got two stones, one is cut to a lower degree of quality and the other one is cut to a higher degree of quality, would you assume that the lower quality one was more advanced? And that's what he's saying. He's saying that the Mayan pyramids, we use that term, the Mayan pyramids were more advanced because they had to be cemented together, where the Egyptians were less advanced because they didn't need cement. It doesn't make sense. None of this is making sense. I'll tell you why at the end. A system whereby the outer blocks of stone carefully joined together without mortar were capable of containing the liquid cement mixed with rubble, making coffering. Sorry, I've already read that bit. Moving on. Furthermore, the architectural art and wall frescoes of these cultures demonstrate the different worldviews. Mayan monuments were painted vibrantly with many colours and scenes depicting ritual sacrifice and religious activities. The artistic representation of human figures and hieroglyphics at sites such as Palenque and Tikal portray strikingly familiar forms to those discovered at Egypt, although, unlike Egypt, were always in the public view. These monumental and artistic forms are the physical expression of religion and power. Around this architecture, the great undertakings of a whole nation were concentrated. It is evident that these scenes were public and in the foreground of public consciousness. The image below demonstrates ritual processions, scenes that were found throughout the Mayan world. On the other hand, while Egyptian pyramids were artistically adorned, the frescoes and paintings were only inside the royal tomb. It is an important message. Mayan art was to be seen by the whole community, even while its purpose benefited the social elite, while Egyptian art was for the deceased pharaoh to keep him safe in the afterlife for eternity. Furthermore, after the pharaohic burial rituals were complete, all the components of the security system were put in place. The entrance was hidden by a stone slab, indistinguishable from the pyramid walls. Nobody was meant to disturb the pharaoh's eternal rest. The pyramid was much more than a tomb, as demonstrated in the next section. Yeah, there's a little bit more of this. I'm not sure I can read that. Egyptian art discovered inside the pyramids. This art served the pharaoh to protect him in the afterlife. Very bad writing in the afterlife. It would not be seen by the public. Archaeologists know much about Egyptian ritual activity from the pyramid texts. Continuing the idea that Egyptian pyramids allowed pharaohs to ascend to the heavens, he would be reunited with Nut, the sky goddess. The pharaoh's rebirth in heaven is complete moving from heavenly life to join the heavenly bodies above. And what does that say to you? I mean, there's a lot of presumptions here. The pharaoh was the site of the dead pharaoh's the pyramid was the site of the dead pharaoh's mystical transfiguration, rebirth, ascent to heaven, as well as his residence in the beyond, from which he ruled over the people of his time. Death was not an end, but a continuation of life. From the pyramid text, it is known that the ascended pharaoh would set sail from a royal port or docking place on the journey from this world to the netherworld, as he joined his ancestors and the other gods aboard a royal bark sailing through the cosmos for eternity. It is believed that the numerous boat pits discovered around Khufu's Great Pyramid were used for this purpose. To ensure that power kept within the royal lineage, one further conception was introduced during the Old Kingdom. A story based around Osiris and Horus was formed. On Earth, Pharaoh Khufu was the living incarnation of Horus, the sky god, while his father, Snefru, ruled in death as Osiris, god of the underworld. When Khufu died, Khufu became Osiris and Khafre became the new Horus. The cycle continued. In the Mayan world, unlike Egypt's, pyramids were rarely used as royal tombs. One exception is the Temple of Inscriptions, Palenque, which served as Pascal's tomb. Mayan pyramids were much more a place for ritual and sacrificial offerings to ancestors, often used in the daily spiritual life of the people. The bas-relief scripture found in Pascal's tomb reveals information about the Maya concept of rebirth. playing an intermediary role between the world of the dead below and the celestial heavens above, suspended between two infinite states of being, the Lord of mythical and divine universe. As such, he is central to keeping order in the universe. On earth, only he has the power of gods, and in partnership with the pantheon can the cycle of creation continue. In conclusion, the similarities between the pyramid building culture of the Egyptians and the Mayans were the result of fundamental aspects of statehood, ideologies and functions based around secular economic power, with the elite at the top looking down upon those below him. He had control of resources and their livelihood. This secular power was backed up with religious ideology based on the idea of a divine king living as the representative of the gods and keeping order in a universe that would be torn apart with chaos from malicious gods unless the cycle of order continued. This cycle forced resources to flow from the periphery towards the center and created a relationship of dependence governed by the central authority. Pyramids are monumental architecture of power that allows this cycle to continue. Now, some of that I don't disagree with, but do you see how this works? Now, this is written by, I presume, a gentleman. It feels like a male writer, for a university question. Now, all the way through this, if you've been following properly, all the way through this, there's loads of references to other pieces of text. So all he's done, he's not found out anything for himself. All he's done is gone to other pieces of text, other writings, and used them as sources. So in other words, all we're doing is we're taking a story and we're repeating it, and we're repeating it, and we are repeating it. So all these young people studying Egyptology and architecture like this, all they're doing is repeating what somebody else has said. They're not finding out for themselves, they're not doing any investigation. And if he tries to submit a paper that says, I've come up with a new idea, this is why, it would be cast as a zero, because he's got no references. In other words, he only passes, he only gets a successful result if he quotes other people's ideas. So in other words, he is downgraded if he comes up with new ideas, and he only succeeds in life if he echoes somebody else's opinion. Now that is why we are failing in history, that's why we are failing at life. Now look at some of these ideas. The pyramids, the Mayan pyramid, yes, structures were built on top of old structures. This doesn't tell us that they were deliberately built this way. This tells us that people found them, recognized them for what they were, or at least revered them, and then tried to build on top of them. We see the same thing in Egypt. We see the Great Pyramid, which is completely different from the burial pyramids. Yes, some of the pyramids were used for burials, but those ones fell apart within a few thousand years. They just crumbled into dust. The Great Pyramid is not a burial pyramid, and that's the one that they were copying, because these people found it later, or years later on, tried to emulate their gods, and simply weren't able to, because they lacked the technology or they lacked the abilities. And we talk about these living gods ascending to heaven. It sounds more to me like it's giving credence to the idea of the Anunnaki. It's giving credence to the idea that the gods were aliens that came to Earth in spaceships and left behind a ruling class who really, really believe that they are going to ascend to heaven and join the gods up on another planet, Nibiru. If you want to believe all that nonsense, or not. Doesn't matter if you believe it, because clearly these people do. Clearly. And we still have the same thing today. When he's talking about hierarchical structure, this goes back to what we were looking at yesterday, and it's true, it does connect back. We've got this system now where we've got a flow of resources from the periphery into the center. You look at this country. We've got all the goods and all the supplies being grown, all the food being grown out in the farms in the provinces, and it all somehow ends up in Phnom Penh, where it ends up shipped to other countries, sold at a profit, and most of that profit ends up in the pockets of people who never once touched a farm tool. So the people who are earning money from it are the people who have somehow taken charge, and not the people who are doing all of the work. And this is what we see in every country in the world, and it's what we've seen for thousands and thousands of years, that we've somehow fallen into this trap where our hard work feeds a tiny minority of controlling elites that we've put there and that we keep there, and that they tell us what to do, and they are literally undermining all of our efforts. And this is what we see everywhere in the world. Look at the presidents of the United States. All of them are related back to the Queen of England. It's one family, one ruling elite family that have stayed in control, and they just interbreed, and they're getting incredibly dumb. Look at Biden. The man is a complete bumbling fool. Trump wasn't part of the agenda. He wasn't part of the family. So I'm not sure where he came from, but it was clear they made a very concerted effort to get rid of him, I think on pain of death. I think he knew he was going to die if he tried to fight much harder. Barack Obama, his mother was related to the Queen of England. He's celebrated as a black president. He wasn't. He was at best half black, and a communist and a complete piece of crap, an absolute scumbag that's pushed America over the brink. All you need to know is that he worked with Clinton and Biden. That's all you need to know about him. So we've got this situation where he's right. We've got this hierarchical structure that existed thousands of years ago that somehow has managed to stay connected. Now he contends that all of these structures have a different root and that they, if you can believe this, his argument here, judging from the work of other people, is that none of these pyramids were built sharing any concept, but they were all built at exactly the same time because each of these cultures developed the same need to make rich people richer. Does that make any sense? And of course the answer is no, it doesn't. Of course not. There are massive connections in the way these things were built. He's ignored all of the connections, like the fact that they had to be quarried, the stones were quarried from a very long distance away. He says they were brought in not by slaves, but by, we know they weren't slaves, we know that. The pyramids were built by young men, dragging rocks behind on ropes. If you look at the website, you can even see a picture of that. And they were built by a series of ramps. The whole theory of the ramps is long gone. People have experimented with it, they've tried to build these ramps, and have failed every time. There is no way. Modern science, we cannot build these ramps that they were supposed to bring these stones up with. So there's no way they were using that. So all of these things have been shot to pieces by history, and he's still quoting it from, I think this was written in the 2000s, I think 2007. I don't know where I got that from. It was from Philip Rawlinson. So I can't see where it was written. I thought it was 2007. So anyway, sorry, it's playing up now. So we don't know. There's a lot we don't know about all this, but we do know that the hierarchical system is probably correct. So this is why we fail. This is why historically we're teaching history very wrong. This is why we're teaching a lot of science very wrong. It's not right, because all we're doing is being taught to copy and quote, and we actually fail if we don't copy and quote. But interestingly, this is what you're going to be up against at university level very, very soon. And this is why I keep pushing you. And I know a lot of you think I push you too hard, or this is easy, why are we bothering with this? This is why. Can any of you write to that standard yet? And you need to. You need to. When we go to university in this country, you are going to be most likely, you're going to be in a university with international standards. That is an international standard. That's what we need to achieve. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Now go and do the quiz where we look at the comparisons and contrast language in this, and then there's something else for you. Thank you very much.